The speedrun of Final Fantasy II is a relatively active one, but mostly so for the Pixel Remaster release. This version has a remarkably low barrier for entry. It clocks in at around 3.5 hours for a newcomer's first attempt, making it a lot shorter than a lot of the more popular mainline games. There are no crazy glitches or skips to learn, and the game is available on a platform that just about everyone owns. The portable versions have seen some love throughout their time as well, but there's one version that plays host to one of the weirdest speedruns I've ever seen in the Final Fantasy series. Of course, not counting those with crazy credits warps. This platform also is possibly one of the most annoying to run. That is the original Famicom release, known as the NES outside of Japan. Part of the reason that this speedrun is weird is because the game itself is weird. This was pretty early in the history of JRPGs, so there weren't really any of the standard features or expectations we've since become accustomed to. The Pixel Remaster did really well to improve the game with some great quality of life features, but early releases such as the Game Boy Advance and Famicom versions are pretty unanimously considered to be quite bad, at least casually. One of the quirks of this game is the lack of a standard level up system. When defeating an enemy in Final Fantasy II, it doesn't simply drop a set amount of XP, but instead the party gains experience in a very literal sense. Casting a spell gives you experience with that spell, making it stronger eventually. Attacking with a specific weapon, such as the bow and arrow, gives you weapon experience, increasing your stats with that particular weapon, and so on. This means that for the speedrun, rather than running from encounters in the early game, runners will fight with swords and barehanded attacks. This is to help guys' damage output and to improve Furion's accuracy with swords to better utilize the sleep sword and curse sword attacks. None of this is necessary in the Famicom version, due to a few key glitches. The Famicom strategies heavily abuse our first glitch, equipping spellbooks. Spellbooks are meant to teach spells to the target that they are used on. However, they can be equipped to a hand slot on a party member, and can produce some pretty crazy unintended side effects when this is done. My favourite is the Fire spellbook. When equipped specifically onto your 4th character's primary hand, it will not only increase the wearer's evasion to 99%, but also make their attacks deal absurdly high damage to enemies. This will kill every enemy in the 80% speedrun in a single hit, including the final boss. Those of you familiar with this game may already see a fundamental shortcoming with relying on this strategy though. You don't always have 4 party members. A big part of this game's plot involves a search for Leon, Maria's brother who is missing after the intro. For most of the game, that 4th slot will be filled by one of a rotating cast of characters from the story until Leon rejoins the party very late in the game. When this isn't the case and the party only has 3 members, speedrunners will use their next glitch, the Wall and Warp instant kill. By casting Wall on an enemy or boss, followed by Warp, Death, or Toad, the target will die, so long as Wall didn't miss. Warp is favoured as it's the cheapest of the 3 spells to acquire. To ensure that the party can even survive, they have the other party members use some of the other tomes. The Arrow tome increases evasion to 50%, and while the wearer can freely cast spells, it will actually crash the game if they attack while holding it. The Thunder tome raises evasion to 90%, and when attacking while holding it, it will cause the party to flee. These 2 tomes are incredibly helpful considering that very few levels are gained throughout the run, so the party is remarkably weak. There are other effects from other tomes, but these are the ones that have been found to be useful in the speedrun so far. Now, earlier I referred to the speedrun as being one of the most annoying in the series. It's relatively hard for battles to go very poorly though with the assistance of these instant kills and tomes. Your team floats like a butterfly and stings like an atom bomb. So why is it annoying? Like a lot of other games in the series, this one has a step route. I feel like this is my version of the frame rule bus analogy at this point, but to put it briefly, encounters aren't truly random in a lot of Final Fantasy games and other JRPGs. In a lot of games from this era, the back-end values that determine where and when you get an encounter are tied directly to the player's movement. This means that consistent movement will produce the same encounters in the same places every single time. This game has a very unique quirk with its step route though. Let's say each time a player takes a step in a dungeon, the game adds 1 to this danger value. Encounters will be triggered when this value reaches 10, 20, 30, and so on. Healing a party member will add 2 to our danger value though. This means that if the runner knows they're 1 tile away from an encounter, they can heal a party member to jump over encounters. Here's the issue though. Potions will heal party members regardless of what health they're at, even full health, but they're expensive. Speedrunners are able to set up a looping manipulation that uses frame-perfect movement on the world map to get an encounter that drops some items that are great to sell for a profit. However, to buy enough potions to get through the run and skip every encounter would take a really long time. What's cheaper and ultimately significantly faster is to teach your party the cure spell. This has one drawback though of not working on a target that already has full health. So how do we take damage though? We're skipping every encounter, and even if we do get an encounter, our evasion is absurdly high. Well, most JRPGs have a poison status, including Final Fantasy II. This will cause a poison target to take damage each turn in battle, and additionally as they walk around outside of battle. This sort of thing can also be found in games like Pokemon and Dragon Quest. So this is perfect. Naturally, as speedrunners walk to the towns and dungeons needed to complete the game, the poison target's health will reduce, so they can heal them back up with cure spells when it's time to skip an encounter. And poison can't kill outside of battle, it'll only reduce the target to 1 HP. So here's the plan. After a grind for those valuable items, speedrunners will manipulate an encounter near the starting town that results in Guy getting poisoned, and allow runners to execute their step route. One problem though. One very annoying problem. Games aren't usually very keen on letting you walk around with a poisoned character. They'll make it very clear that you're taking damage each step you take. In Pokemon, for example, the screen will kind of blur every few steps as a visual heads up. In Final Fantasy II, however, runners have to listen to this for almost 2 hours. I'm fairly certain this alone is what prevents the category from seeing more activity. It's an incredibly technical, intricate speedrun with some really cool stuff going on under the hood. It's just held back by being so difficult to play with audio. There is a pretty funny side effect found in the ending cutscene, where when Guy walks towards the throne, even though the player isn't moving, the game still screeches with each step he takes, but otherwise this is terrible. When I first came across this run making the hardest bosses video for Final Fantasy II, I know I wanted to make a whole video about it. A breakdown of the entire run. The problem is though that in explaining these glitches, I kind of already have. There's intricate techniques being used, but the vast majority of the run is getting geared up at shops, taking advantage of the step route mechanics to efficiently travel through dungeons, and using whatever instant kill method is available to take out bosses. There's one other way to speedrun the Famicom version though. Glitchless categories. There isn't an official rule set or a category on speedrun.com yet, but there have been a handful of runners that have tried speedruns with some sort of glitchless rule set or ones that otherwise prohibit manipulating encounters. This would be a really nice category to have around in an official capacity. People would easily be able to find runs that properly utilize the game's progression system, at least for the Famicom version. We'd also actually be able to listen to the game's killer soundtrack. In looking at the routing that's been done so far, these categories look to rely on Furion as something of a solo carry. Since there are no EXP drops from defeating enemies, but instead based on actions taken, experience can be farmed very early, very easily. Friendly fire does contribute to experience, so by having Furion equip a sword and a shield, and then hitting himself in battle repeatedly, you can quickly grind levels for Furion's sword to help his damage output, levels for his shield to help reduce the damage he'll take in later dungeons, and his maximum HP. Yes, it even goes that far. Taking damage from a spell, for example, will give EXP to your magic defense and to your max HP. It's such a cool mechanic in my opinion. So runners will dedicate a good amount of time to this. Grinding here does create a pretty slow early game, but you get into go mode quite quickly. Fire tomes are still used in glitchless speedruns, but as a consumable item as partly intended. While the tome can be used to teach a spell, it'll teach the spell to a party member at level 1. Using a tome as an item will give a single cast of a much higher leveled version. This is helpful to take out groups of enemies that the party is unable to flee from. From here, the run starts to somewhat resemble the Pixel Remaster run. Furion will take advantage of the sword levels that were gained early to have good damage and accuracy with the Blood Sword, which heals part of the damage dealt to enemies, and the most useful weapon in the speedrun, the Ancient Sword, sometimes known as the Cursed Sword. When an enemy is hit by the Ancient Sword, their attack stat and their defense stat is cut in half. So this is how Furion can solo carry. He drops their stats with the Cursed Sword, and then takes them out with the Blood Sword. Double shields will often be equipped to improve survival chances against some of the tougher enemies found in late game dungeons. And finally, at the end of the game, Maria and Guy are revived as dummy targets for the boss to have a lower chance of targeting Furion while he uses his powerful weapons to take out the boss in just a few turns.
어? お願いします。
お願いします。
まあそれなら
皇帝だ
ー。怖っ。
相馬に似てるアップ、皇帝覚悟。
あと5回ヒット。オッケー。あ、昨日より早いわ。更新。
パチパチパチ。
This really is only scratching the surface, but there are runners doing great work to showcase that this game has a lot more to offer as a speedrun. I really do hope to see some more people consider speedruns of this version, and hopefully one day even get a more quote-unquote official glitchless rule set and leaderboard. The game certainly has its shortcomings, but I have a soft spot for it. I just think it's neat. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you very much to our Patreon supporters. It's $2 a month, you get some great behind the scenes stuff, and you get to vote on a monthly speedrun challenge. We've done a bunch of games at this point. The most recent one that we did was Super Mario Bros. 1 as a 12-hour challenge. It was a really hard challenge, but it was really fun. If you want a free way to support the video though, just send it to a friend that you think will enjoy it. If you want to see more of what I do, I stream on Twitch over at Sire TV. And if you're interested in Final Fantasy II as a speedrun, I'll link the Discord as well in the comments. But thank you as always, and I'll see you next time.